Under the cover of darkness, they lured Ada to the witch doctor's hut, pretending it was a surprise. Ada, trusting her husband, Kasali, followed them and arrived at the hut. Inside, the witch doctor began chanting, the air growing colder. Ada's eyes widened in fear. "Kasali, what is happening?" she cried out, calling her husband's name. But Kasali couldn't look her in the eyes. Pain and guilt washed down on him. Maduka, his friend, whispered, "It will all be over soon." With a swift motion, the witch doctor raised a knife, piercing through. Ada's lifeless body fell to the floor. The room filled with eerie silence. The witch doctor turned to them, revealing a shocking and twisted fate. The witch doctor's eyes gleamed with a knowing intensity as she revealed the conditions of the ritual. "Maduka, you're the only one that shall reap the rewards of wealth, but at a steep price. You must support Kasali financially, a constant reminder of the true cost of the success." Maduka's eyes widened in confusion. Kasali, still trembling with grief, whispered, "Why me? Why must I suffer? My wife was the one who was sacrificed. Why am I not wealthy too?" The witch doctor turned to him, her voice soft but stern. "The sacrifice was hers, but the choice was never yours, Kasali. The choice was Maduka. You are to live with the weight of that choice, bound to depend, never free of it. Maduka's wealth will be yours as well, but he will be the one to always provide whatever financial support you demand for, because your loss is the foundation of his gain." The witch doctor gave a clear and sound condition that came with the wealth. Maduka and Kasali agreed, sealing their pact. They left the hut, their hands stained with blood and hearts heavy with the price they had paid. But one question remained. How long would Kasali keep depending on Maduka for a living? The story began in a bustling city of Africa, where Maduka and Kasali lived as neighbors, consumed by a burning desire for quick wealth. Maduka, a bachelor and an orphan with no trace of siblings or relatives, spent his days scheming, while Kasali, married to his kind-hearted wife, Ada, obsessed over escaping their modest life. One evening, both friends met at a local bar, drowning their frustrations in drinks. "We need to find a way to get rich, and fast," Maduka declared, eyes narrowing with determination. Kasali nodded vigorously. "But how? We've tried almost everything." Several nights passed in the same bar, with the same complaints, but tonight felt different. A man who had been sitting nearby for the last few evenings leaned back in his chair, swirling his drink thoughtfully. His presence had been unnoticed until now, but tonight his eyes lingered on the two men. "Seems like you both are looking for something," the man said, his voice calm but laced with a quiet menace. Maduka glared at him, but something in the stranger's demeanor held his gaze. "Where do you come from?" he asked. The man shrugged. "I've heard your kind of talk before. Desperate men looking for a way out, willing to try anything." Kasali glanced at the man, feeling uneasy. "Who are you?" he asked. The man took a slow sip of his drink before speaking. "I'm just someone who has been in your shoes before. I know someone who can help you, but it's not for everyone." Maduka leaned forward, his voice low and eager. "We've tried everything. What do you know that we don't?" The stranger's eyes darkened, and he leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's a witch doctor, deep in the forest. She can grant you what you seek, but it comes at a cost." Kasali trembled, but Maduka's gaze sharpened as he asked, "What kind of cost?" The man smiled darkly. "A cost you can't even imagine." He stood up, tossing a piece of paper containing his phone number and address on the table. "I'll leave it to you both to decide how far you're willing to go," he said, and then left. Maduka, the ever desperate and always ready to act individual, grabbed the paper without hesitation, tucking it into his pocket as if it were his ticket to freedom. Kasali, however, was more reluctant. "I'm not sure about this idea, Maduka. Ada wouldn't be pleased with such a move, even though she dreams of a better life." Maduka cut him off quickly. "You don't have to be scared, Kasali. You don't even need to tell her about it. You're the man of the house. Once we succeed, she'll be too busy enjoying the wealth to care how it came about." No risk, no reward. Kasali sighed, feeling the weight of the decision. I'll give it a chance, let's see what comes out of this. That night, thoughts plagued Kasali. He knew deep down that consulting a witch doctor wasn't the right path, but poverty had backed him into a corner, and the thought of giving Ada the life she deserved was too tempting. Despite the nagging voice in his head, he made up his mind to meet the witch doctor. The following day, Maduka and Kasali met again, more determined than ever. In a desperate bid to change their fortunes, they headed straight to the address the stranger had provided. When they arrived, they were amazed by the grandeur of the mansion standing before them. It was the very picture of wealth, elegant, imposing, and lavishly decorated. Yet, something felt off. There were no guards, no maids, no security personnel of any kind. For such a mansion, the absence of them was unsettling. Kasali shifted uncomfortably, his earlier unease returning. Inside, they were greeted by the stranger, seated in an opulent living room that seemed almost too quiet. After exchanging pleasantries, Maduka couldn't help but ask, "Why don't you have guards or servants in a place like this?" The stranger smiled, a cryptic smile that sent a chill down Kasali's spine. "I have no need for them." The room fell silent, the weight of his words heavy in the air. Kasali and Maduka exchanged uneasy glances. There was no denying it now, the stranger was not ordinary. His wealth, his manner, everything about him was surrounded in mystery. Not wasting any more time, Maduka spoke up, his voice eager, "We're ready. Tell us how to meet the witch doctor." The stranger leaned back in his chair, regarding them carefully. "You've already taken the first step by coming here. The witch doctor you shall find now. But note this, once you meet her, there's no going back." Kasali swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest, while Maduka nodded, resolute. They had made their decision, and the wheels of fate had already begun to turn. Desperation clouded their judgment, and the next day they ventured deep into a dark forest, arriving at a small, eerie hut. The air was thick with the scent of strange herbs and distant drums. They hesitated but stepped inside. An old woman with piercing eyes greeted them. "I know why you are here," she said, her voice echoing ominously. "You seek wealth, but it comes at a price." Maduka and Kasali exchanged glances, their resolve hardening. "What must we do?" Maduka asked. The witch doctor smiled, her sharp teeth gleaming in the dim light. "What you ask for comes at a great cost. A sacrifice is required, and it must be someone precious to either of you." Maduka and Kasali exchanged uneasy glances. They had known there would be a price, but the reality of it was starting to sink in. They had come too far to turn back now. But still, the thought of a sacrifice, someone they knew, someone they loved, hung over them like a dark cloud. Maduka's mind raced, searching for an alternative. He was a bachelor with no close family left. Orphaned and alone, there was no one in his life he could offer up, no one he could sacrifice for wealth. His eyes narrowed in frustration. He had already gambled everything for this moment. There was no one left. Meanwhile, Kasali was struggling to keep it together. His thoughts turned to Ada, the one person who meant the world to him. She had stood by him through thick and thin, always believing in a better future for them both. But now, that future was crumbling before his eyes. There had to be another way, something, anything, but the witch doctor's warning echoed in his head. "There is no other way. If you leave this shrine without completing the ritual, the dark forces will come for you," the witch doctor warned cautiously. "Your lives, your very souls, are at stake." Kasali's heart pounded in his chest, and he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. This can't be the only way," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. Maduka, seeing no other option, sighed heavily. "There's no one else, Kasali. My life, it's empty. No family, no connections. If we walk away now, we'll lose everything, our lives, everything we've worked for, will be for nothing. This is our last shot." Kasali, eyes wide, shook his head in disbelief. "No, Maduka. Not Ada. She's all I have. You can't ask me to do this. But Maduka's face had hardened, a mixture of desperation and cold resolve. It's not what I want, Kasali. It's what we need. It's the only option left. If you don't agree, we're dead men. Kasali's body trembled, his mind swirling in turmoil. He looked at the witch doctor, hoping for some sign of reprieve, but her face remained impassive. There was no escape, no other path. Tears welled up in Kasali's eyes as he realized the terrible truth. Ada, the love of his life, was the only person close enough to him to satisfy the ritual. His heart screamed in protest, but his mind knew the answer was already decided. If he didn't make the sacrifice, they would both face a fate worse than death. With a broken voice, he pleaded, there must be something else. Please, I beg you. I can't do this. The witch doctor shook her head, unmoved. This is the price. The forces demand balance. You either complete the ritual, or suffer their wrath. Kasali's legs gave out beneath him, and he collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. He could feel the walls of his life closing in, crushing him under the weight of an impossible decision. But Maduka's voice rang in his ears, cold and unyielding. She's the only way, Kasali. If we don't do this, it's over. With a final, shuddering breath, Kasali nodded, the tears streaming down his face. His heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, but he knew he had no choice. There was no other option. Ada would be sacrificed. The next day, under the cover of darkness, they lured Ada to the witch doctor's hut, pretending it was a surprise. Ada, trusting her husband, Kasali, followed them and arrived at the hut. The witch doctor began chanting, the air growing colder. Ada's eyes widened in fear. Kasali, what is happening? She cried out. But Kasali couldn't look her in the eyes. Pain and guilt washed down on him. Maduka whispered, it will all be over soon. With a swift motion, the witch doctor raised a knife, piercing through. Ada's lifeless body fell to the floor. The room filled with eerie silence. The witch doctor turned to them, revealing a shocking and twisted fate. The witch doctor's eyes gleamed with a knowing intensity as she revealed the conditions of the ritual. Maduka, you're the only one to reap the rewards of wealth, but at a steep price. You must support Kasali financially, a constant reminder of the true cost of the success. Maduka's eyes widened in confusion. Kasali, still trembling with grief, whispered, why me? Why must I suffer? My wife was the one who was sacrificed. Why am I not wealthy too? The witch doctor turned to him, her voice soft but stern. The sacrifice was hers, but the choice was never yours, Kasali. The choice was Maduka's. You are to live with the weight of that choice, bound to depend, never free of it. Maduka's wealth will be yours as well, but he will be the one to always provide whatever financial support you demand for, because your loss is the foundation of his gain. The witch doctor gave a clear and sound condition that came with the wealth. Maduka and Kasali agreed, sealing their pact. They left the hut, hands stained with blood and hearts heavy with the price they had paid. Months passed, and Maduka's fortune grew. He acquired lavish homes, expensive cars, and fine clothes. Kasali, though not wealthy, lived comfortably with Maduka's support. The two men, bound by their dark secret, continued their lives in the bustling city. Maduka married a beautiful woman named Neka. She reveled in their luxurious lifestyle but grew increasingly frustrated by Maduka's constant gifts and cash to Kasali, unaware of their dark secret and bond. Why do you keep giving him money? She asked one day, her voice tinged with annoyance. He's my friend, Maduka replied simply, avoiding her gaze. Friend or not, he should earn his own money, Neka insisted. This has to stop. Maduka felt torn between his wife's demands and the bond he has with Kasali. He knew breaking the pact could have dire consequences, but he couldn't bear to see Neka so upset. As months went by, Neka's frustration turned to anger. She pressured Maduka daily, her words biting and relentless. Tell your friend to work for his money, she demanded. Or I will. Maduka knew he couldn't keep this secret forever. He began to distance himself from Kasali, reducing the amounts he gave until he stopped altogether. Kasali, struggling without Maduka's support, felt the sting of betrayal deeply. His once comfortable life turned difficult, and his resentment grew. One night, filled with anger and regret, Kasali confronted Maduka. "How could you do this to me? After everything we went through?" Maduka stood firm. "I can't keep supporting you, Kasali. You need to move on." Kasali's face twisted with rage. "Move on? You think I can just forget what we did? What I lost?" Maduka remained silent, the weight of their actions pressing down on him. Kasali stormed out, his heart burning with bitterness and hatred. In the days that followed, Kasali's thoughts grew darker. He couldn't escape the image of his wife and the life he had destroyed. Maduka's wealth, flaunted before him, only deepened his resentment. Driven by despair, Kasali became obsessed with revenge. His once friendly demeanor turned cold and distant. He watched as Maduka and Neka enjoyed their wealth, the anger festering within him. Maduka, unaware of Kasali's growing hatred, continued to live lavishly. He hosted grand parties, traveled to exotic places, and flaunted his wealth. Neka, though happy with their lifestyle, remained suspicious of Maduka's past connection with Kasali. "Why do you always seem to avoid him now?" she asked one evening. Maduka shrugged. "We've just grown apart." Neka wasn't convinced. "There's more to this, isn't there?" Maduka felt the walls closing in. The guilt of his actions weighed heavily on him, but he couldn't reveal the truth. He tried to placate Neka, assuring her that everything was fine. Kasali, meanwhile, couldn't shake the memories of his wife. He often visited her grave, talking to her as if she were still alive. His grief twisted into a desire for vengeance. He couldn't stand seeing Maduka happy while he suffered. One night, after a particularly lavish party at Maduka's mansion, Kasali decided he had had enough. He went to a dark alleyway and bought a gun from a shady dealer. The cold metal in his hand felt like the embodiment of his anger and pain. He spent the next few days planning his next move. He knew he couldn't live with the guilt any longer. He needed to confront Maduka, to make him pay for the betrayal. On a stormy night, Kasali made his way to Maduka's mansion. The rain poured down in torrents, matching the turmoil inside him. He stood outside the grand gates, drenched and shaking, both from the cold and the fury that consumed him. He forced his way inside, startling the guards who quickly fled in fear. Kasali stormed through the mansion, his eyes wild and unseeing, until he found Maduka and Neka in the living room. "Kasali, what are you doing?" Maduka shouted, rising to his feet. But Kasali's eyes were cold and distant. "This ends now," he said, raising the gun. Neka screamed, but Kasali was beyond reason. "You betrayed me," he spat. "We made a pact, and you broke it." Maduka tried to calm him down. "Kasali, please, let's talk about this." But Kasali's grip tightened on the gun. "There's nothing left to say." In a flurry of gunshots, the room filled with chaos. Maduka and Neka fell, their lives extinguished in an instant. Kasali stood over them, breathing heavily, the enormity of his actions sinking in. Tears streamed down his face as he turned the gun on himself. In his final moments, he whispered, "I'm sorry, Ada." The bustling city awoke to the shocking news of the tragic deaths. The tale of Maduka and Kasali became more than just a whisper of warning. It echoed through every household and market stall, a painful reminder of how far greed can push even the closest of friends into darkness. In their desperate pursuit of wealth, they lost what truly mattered: love, loyalty, and their very souls. The story became a cautionary tale for all who heard it, a warning that the price of greed is often far greater than we imagine, and once the line is crossed, there is no going back. For in the end, it is not the wealth we gather, but the relationships we destroy that define our legacy. Let this be a lesson: money is sweet, but we must work hard for it, for easy money comes with hidden thorns. The shortcuts we take today can become the chains that bind us tomorrow. The pursuit of quick riches often leads to ruin, and sometimes, what we stand to lose is far greater than anything we stand to gain. Please like and subscribe. It may look simple for you, but for us it's very valuable, and it keeps us pushing to provide more interesting stories and tales, not just for your entertainment, but also for you to gain new experiences in life, to tackle new encounters. Thanks so much for your support.